They told us we were going to make history. When I signed up for Project Limbus, I thought I was being sent to a cutting-edge research station, a secret base on the moon hidden from the public eye. They promised us prestige, technology beyond imagination, and a mission that would change the course of human history. They didn't tell us what we'd be sharing the moon with. The shuttle ride up had been smooth, almost too smooth. No turbulence, no jolts, no last-minute problems. Just a perfect, silent ascent through the void. If you've ever flown in space, you know that's unnatural. Space travel isn't smooth. It's a constant battle against physics, radiation, and the 100 things that can kill you before you even get where you're going. But our trip was different. It was as if something, or someone, wanted us to arrive. There were 6 of us on board, all handpicked for our specialties. We weren't astronauts, we were operatives. A mix of military and scientific personnel, under strict orders to maintain the base and protect its assets at all costs. I remember the first time I saw Lunar Base Omega through the shuttle's viewport. It was nothing like the sleek futuristic space stations shown in sci-fi movies. This thing looked old, a cluster of dull gray structures buried into the dark side of the moon, with massive steel doors half covered in lunar dust. There were no bright NASA logos, no welcoming lights, just cold metal, scarred by time. As we approached, the pilot glanced at us with something I can only describe as pity. "You boys be careful down there," he muttered. "And follow the rules." Before we could ask what he meant, we had docked. The doors opened. We stepped inside, and the nightmares began. It didn't take long to notice something was off. The base was too quiet. We had been told there would be a full team already stationed here, at least 12 personnel maintaining the facility before our arrival, but the place felt abandoned. We found no one in the central hub. The hallways were empty. The communication channels were dead. Then we found the rules, a printed list, taped to the inside of the mess hall's door. The paper was worn, covered in what looked like dried blood. 1. Do not open the airlock after dark, no matter what you hear. 2. If you wake up and see someone standing at the end of your bed, do not move. Do not blink. Wait until they leave. 3. Ignore the voices in the vents. They are not your friends. 4. Do not look outside between 2:33 a.m. and 2:47 a.m., no matter what you think you see moving. 5. If you find a crew member you don't recognize, ask them what flight they came on. If they can't answer, run. 6. Check the security cameras every 3 hours. If something is moving in a blind spot, alert command immediately. 7. Never mention Earth. Never say its name. Never think about home. It knows. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. One of my teammates, Rodriguez, scoffed. "This some kind of hazing ritual?" He tore the paper down, crumpling it in his fist. That night, Rodriguez disappeared. We searched everywhere. Every hallway, every locked room, every air vent. Rodriguez was just gone. His suit was still in the locker. The airlock hadn't been used. The base's only rover was untouched. There was no way off the station. Yet, sometime between midnight and 3 a.m., he had vanished into thin air. We checked the security footage. What we saw still haunts me. At exactly 2:33 a.m., Rodriguez stood up from his cot. His movements were slow, almost unnatural. His head twitched to the side, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. Then, he walked straight to the airlock. The footage became distorted, static swallowing the screen. Then, for a single second, the camera feed returned. Rodriguez was standing outside the base. No spacesuit, no helmet, just standing there, in the vacuum of space, staring back at us. His mouth was open in a scream, but there was no sound. Then he was gone. That was the first death. It wouldn't be the last. And worst of all, that night, after we lost Rodriguez, we heard something knocking on the airlock, not from the inside, from the outside. None of us slept after that. The knocking started at 2:33 a.m., the exact time Rodriguez had gotten up the night before. It was slow, deliberate. Tap, 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 like a single knuckle rapping against the metal airlock door. We stared at each other, silent, too afraid to move. The security feed showed nothing, just an empty gray expanse outside the base. But the knocking continued. Bennett, our team's engineer, was the first to break. "It's him," he whispered. His voice was shaking. "Rodriguez, maybe he's still alive out there." "That's impossible," I hissed back. "You saw the footage. He was outside with no suit." "Then what the hell else could it be?" The knocking stopped. For a moment the silence was worse. Then something scraped against the metal. Slow, like fingernails dragging across a coffin lid. My stomach twisted into knots. And then we heard the voice. "Please, let me in." It sounded exactly like Rodriguez. Bennett moved toward the airlock. I grabbed him, yanking him back. "Don't," I snapped. "Read the rules. Do not open the airlock after dark. No matter what you hear." "But what if it's him?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Rodriguez was dead. But something else was wearing his voice. The air on Lunar Base Omega was stale, metallic, and wrong. The filtration systems were supposed to keep it clean, but the place smelled different after Rodriguez vanished. Not just the usual recycled air, but something else. Something organic. Like damp earth and decaying leaves. By the second night, we started hearing breathing in the vents. At first, we thought it was just the station's machinery, the old ducts groaning, shifting as they cycled air. But then I heard it up close. It was wet. A slow, raspy inhale, followed by a shuddering exhale. And it was moving. I lay in my cot, staring at the ceiling as the sound crept above me, sliding through the vents like something dragging itself forward on its belly. My fingers clenched around the metal frame of my bed. Then it stopped. Directly above me. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was my own breathing. My own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Then something scraped against the inside of the vent, like fingernails. I forced myself to stay still, and then, just for a second, I heard it whisper my name. "Daniel." My blood turned to ice. I didn't sleep after that. None of us did. Bennett was the second to disappear. One moment he was with us, the next he was gone. We checked the security cameras. Same as Rodriguez. 2:33 a.m., he got out of bed, walked down the main corridor, and then... static. When the feed returned, the hallway was empty. But there was something new this time. Something standing at the end of the corridor. At first, we thought it was Bennett, but then we noticed the way it was standing, the way its head twitched every few seconds, its limbs too long for a normal man, the way its fingers curled, too many joints bending in the wrong direction. We watched in frozen horror as the figure slowly turned its head toward the camera. Its face was wrong, too smooth, featureless, like a mask stretched over something that had forgotten how to be human. Then, in one impossible movement, it lurched forward, its body snapping toward the camera like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. The feed cut out, and Bennett was gone. We had lost 2 men. We were running out of rations. The base felt wrong, like the walls themselves were breathing. That night, I finally got desperate enough to check the station's classified logs. The previous cruise reports, the ones we were never supposed to see. Most of the files were corrupted, filled with static and gibberish. But I found one that still worked. A voice recording from the base's last commander. I played it. A man's voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded tired, broken. "If you're hearing this, you weren't supposed to come here. None of us were. The base isn't abandoned. It's feeding." A pause. Then, in a whisper, "We were never alone on the moon." The audio distorted. The voice changed. It was no longer human. "Do not think about Earth." The recording cut out. Because as soon as I heard those words, my mind betrayed me. I thought about home, about the blue oceans, the forests, the cities glowing in the dark, and then I felt it. Something in the station shifted. Something woke up, and somewhere in the vents, I heard something laughing. We had to leave. There were only 3 of us left. We sprinted to the communications hub, desperate to send a distress call, but when we activated the transmitter, the signal bounced back. A single message appeared on the screen. "There is no escape, And then the alarm started blaring. Something was coming. The walls groaned. The lights flickered, and then the knocking returned. But this time it wasn't just at the airlock. It was coming from inside the station. The knocking came from everywhere. The airlock, the vents, the doors, the goddamn walls. Bang, bang, bang. The base was shaking, metal groaning under an unseen pressure. Something wanted in. No, scratch that. Something was already inside. Move, now, I shouted. I grabbed Kessler by the arm, yanking him toward the emergency supply lockers. Davison was already there, tearing through the gear, his breathing ragged and panicked. "What the hell do we do?" Kessler screamed. I didn't know. There was no escape shuttle. The base was meant for long-term deployment, with only scheduled transport from Earth. But we couldn't stay here, not anymore. That's when I saw it. A single word printed on the emergency locker's door. Surface. Vehicle. Access. The rover. A lump formed in my throat. It wasn't a great plan, but it was something. The base had a pressurized rover for long-range scouting. If we could make it there, we might be able to get far enough away from the station to send a distress beacon, if Earth even heard us. I turned to Davison. "We suit up, get to the rover, and drive as far as we can. It has an emergency transmitter. Maybe it still works." He nodded, shoving a helmet into my hands. "Let's move." Kessler hesitated. What if it's out there? I didn't have an answer, because I knew, deep down, that it was. The station was falling apart. The lights flickered, casting long, shifting shadows down the corridors. The air was thick, like we were breathing something that wasn't meant for human lungs. And the whispers. God, the whispers. They slithered through the vents, curling around us like fingers, soft and mocking. "Don't go. Stay with us. Come home." I forced my legs to move, one foot in front of the other, faster, faster. Then I heard Davison scream. I turned just in time to see him yanked into the darkness. "Davis!" Kessler bellowed. We saw a hand, or something shaped like a hand, dragging him into the vent. His body folded wrong, his limbs bending at impossible angles as he disappeared into the shadows. Then the screaming stopped. Then we heard chewing. Kessler broke. He turned and ran. I didn't have time to grieve. I ran after him. We reached the airlock in seconds, slamming into the control panel. The depressurization process took a lifetime. Then the door slid open, and I saw it. It was standing just beyond the rover, watching us. I knew immediately that it had once been human. Or at least, it had tried to be. Its body was a mess of stretched skin and hollowed out features. A twisted mockery of a spacesuit fused with something much, much older. Its helmet was cracked, but there was nothing inside, just a yawning, empty void. And the worst part? It was wearing Rodriguez's face. Not his real face, but an attempt at one. As if something had tried to remember what he looked like and had gotten all the details wrong. It smiled, and then it spoke. "Daniel, come back inside, you forgot your helmet." My stomach dropped. I wasn't wearing my helmet, but I could still hear it. Kessler screamed and bolted for the rover. I followed, slamming my palm against the access panel. The doors opened. We threw ourselves inside and sealed it behind us. For a moment, nothing moved. Then something pressed its face against the glass. We floored it. The rover's wheels spun wildly against the lunar dust, the small craft lurching forward into the endless night. The station shrank behind us, swallowed by darkness. But I didn't look back. Kessler was shaking. "It's not gonna work. The beacon, it's not gonna work." I didn't answer. Because I knew he was right. The moon wasn't empty. It never had been. There were things here, things that had been waiting in the shadows long before we arrived. And we had just woken them up. Kessler let out a broken laugh. "We're never getting off this rock, are we?" I stared out at the endless, black horizon. The transmitter signal flickered, weak, barely a whisper in the void. Then, just for a second, I thought I saw something moving. Not behind us, ahead, waiting. The radio crackled to life. A voice, my own voice, whispered through the static. "Daniel, come home." And then the lights went out.